Thanks, Wusidi. No, I thought I must just say something briefly in support of what has been said by our teachers here. Speaking to you as change agents. I think if there's anybody here who does not think of himself as a change agent, I think maybe they can leave and go and have a cup of coffee somewhere. We meet here because we are committed to this task, to be these change agents, to change our society, our country, our continent for the better. Now, I think that the question that then arises from what we saw presented and what has just been said now by our teachers is, what is your response? What do we do about this condition which clearly is unacceptable? It's really basically Africa relative to the rest of the world. This asymmetry of power that's been spoken of and its consequences. You will have seen from the thing that was played here that this was at what is called the Valdai Discussion Club. The Valdai Discussion Club is a Russian think tank. It's a think tank based in Russia, but draws in thinkers from around the world. And they have an annual conference. It's active throughout the year, but they have an annual conference. And this one, which was last year, which I attended, was number 13. I'm mentioning that because they told me, the organizers of the Valdai Discussion Club Forum, that this was the first time they were having an African participate in their 13th year. So for 13 years, for 12 years, you've had this discussion at this think tank in Russia, bringing in Russian thinkers, Chinese, American, everybody in the world, without the Africans. It's a description exactly of what we've been talking about, what the teachers have been saying now, about the marginalization of the African continent. No doubt symptomatic of the marginalization of women in terms of gender relations. But it poses the question, what then do we do as Africans? That's why I'm saying, we see that I think there's a task on our thought leaders here to respond to what they've heard said by the teachers and what was said here on screen. What do we do about this condition? Not just to cry, but to say we must change things. And that includes changing ourselves. You know, many years ago, one of the leaders on the continent, he told me two stories. One of our presidents, he was talking about his colleagues, fellow presidents on the continent. And he said to me, one day he was listening on radio, and the late President Patase, we remember who Patase was? No. President Patase was the president of the Central African Republic. And he said to me that I listened to radio, and there was President Patase addressing the nation, Central African Republic. And he makes an extraordinary statement and says, I am French first and Central African second. So I say, President, you don't mean that. He says, no, I heard him with my own ears. Now, Central African Republic, of course, as you know, was a French colony. And And here comes an African leader who actually says that to his people. I am French first, I'm Central African second. Now, I think so long as we've got people of that kind, we can't complain about being marginalized, asymmetrical power, because we become part of the instruments to construct exactly that kind of world. What do we do about things like that? The second example he gave me, the president, was one of our presidents. He spends a lot of time in Europe, not enough at home. And then there's a state visit. And you know what happens? At some point, the host president must introduce the visiting president to the entire cabinet. So they line up, the local ministers. And you, as the host president, are walking side by side with your colleague to introduce him or her to this lineup of ministers. Now, problem was that the host president, because he doesn't spend enough time at home, he would say, this is, Your Excellency, this is Vusikumede, Minister of Foreign Affairs. And then the next minister is Mandla Makanya, Minister of Home Affairs. But the president would say, by the way, who are you? See, now I'm saying, where you have us becoming part of the process of reinforcing that asymmetry of power with the negative consequences that it has, we as thought leaders here have got to say, what is it that we do to make sure that we don't reproduce that kind of political system which results in all of the negative consequences that we're talking about. So it's both a matter of impacting on ourselves and impacting on the rest of the world, so that we then do have a global system such that we are then better able to address the challenges that we face of development, of peace, of democracy, of gender equality, of all of these things, within, as was said, within a context which facilitates the achievement of those objectives. A global context, but also a domestic African context, which helps to address. I'm very, very interested to hear not questions, but answers from yourselves about how do we respond to these challenges. Thanks, Vusi.